Well, the new trailer for Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which I guess is now the official name for Part 2 of Breath of the Wild, no longer BOTW2, but now Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, is coming out, and Nintendo dropped their new trailer for it yesterday, which is really exciting. Now, if you've watched my channel before, you know I've done a bunch of videos about Breath of the Wild. I think it's a really great game to think about, talk about archaeology, see some examples of archaeology. So I thought I'd watch the trailer with you and maybe talk about some of the things that I see that speak to it. Well, let's see if it still is a good archaeology game, or maybe what archaeology can do to help us interpret a little bit of what we see in the trailer and maybe learn a little bit about what the game's going to be. So let's dive into it. So we start out in the opening with this sort of motif of pictograph-like ancient wall writings. Now, obviously, this is something that was in the original game we saw a lot of, right? They're clearly inspired by similar sorts of concepts that we see, frankly, all around the world, but obviously in Egypt and in many Central and South American cultures, we see these sorts of writings. One thing that's kind of interesting and different is I think that these are meant to evoke these ancient styles of writing, which gives it this feeling of oldness, of archaeologicalness, whatever we want to call it. But it's different than those because this is not actually a pictographic or a phonetic alphabet like we might see in actual writings from many ancient cultures, or even more recent ones that sort of look like this. But instead, these are artistic representations of either historic events or legends from the series or from the specific world of Breath of the Wild in this new game, which of course in the Zelda universe are sort of one and the same thing. So the next thing we see here is maybe a foreshadowing of an event in the story, perhaps a sort of central event that maybe structures a lot of the rest of the game, with this character falling. Zelda, I assume. One thing I think is really interesting is that Zelda stories themselves are often based in themes of prophecy and cyclical repetition, right? The idea that things happen in one game and then we expect them to happen in another game. Similarly, the games are structured similarly in this way. And that's actually true with a lot of ancient mythology as well. We see that again and again in ancient myths. Lots of games draw on this idea and are inspired by this idea. Although in the real world, usually things don't literally come true, which is something that we can do in a fantasy game where your character discovers some ancient wall text that's foreshadow the future, and then, of course, that event actually occurs. So that distance between the past and the present is narrower, which is sort of interesting and cool to think about. Now, the next shots, of course, are ones I've seen a lot of people talking about, and there's some real Skyward Sword vibes here. Sort of a more like Skyward Sword, am I right? Sorry. Really sorry about that. Now, as is typical with these sorts of trailers like this, we get some shots here of what'll probably be new gameplay elements with these cool floating rock elevator thingies, and then the sort of stinger of the whole trailer, the exciting moment, is this flying bird stone, whatever it is. And then I think really interesting actually in this shot is what's in the background. We get this cool lookout over the landscape. And of course, these landscapes in Breath of the Wild were so important. They were such an integral part of the game. And we can see here in the distance this glowing, I guess we'll call it a petroglyph, like a massive petroglyph that immediately brings to mind for me lots of examples from the world, like the Nazca lines or European giant hill figurines or other things like this. Right, this is a human practice we see in many parts of the world, making these massive line drawings that are really only meant to be seen from distances above. That's the only way you can really perceive them correctly. We see that here. So again, a little bit of a drawing from an archaeological inspiration to do something kind of cool. The next we get is the title splash, which first of all looks great. I really love, this is not archaeology, but I love this lime green color motif. I think it's evocative of the first game, but it's also something a little different. Obviously, I think design-wise, they're using this color to both connect this to Breath of the Wild, but also separate it a little bit at the same time. They're doing, that's some great graphic design. As you know, graphic design is my passion. We have this motif of like two serpents or dragons sort of Ouroborosing themselves. I'm not at all clever enough to surmise whatever that's might mean, if that's going to tell us something about the story. Maybe somebody else is piecing that together. What we might learn about the story from that. It does continue the theme of using pictograph-like imagery, which brings to mind sort of subconsciously for the viewer something ancient, something archaeological, perhaps something foreign or different or othered, right? If we want to think about maybe some of the darker sides of this, but nonetheless, it's an effective tactic. Anyway, I think the game looks great. If you ask me what I was hoping for in the game, I hope it's weird. I hope it gets its weird on. I hope it's a little bit more like Majora's Mask as a sequel, rather than being sort of just like a big DLC for Breath of the Wild. And it looks like that's what they're going for. Obviously, the setting is the same; it's using the same engine, but it looks like they're doing something really different here, and hopefully, it's got that same unique vibe and feel that Majora's Mask did. That really felt different. Well, all right, that's me, Bill Farley, speaking for VG Archaeology. Thank you all so much for checking me out. Please do like this, leave a comment, tell me what you thought about the trailer, or anything else you noticed in there that you think might have some cool archaeology connections, or just something that you think that it might speak to about the lore of the game, or what it might tell us about the upcoming sequel. And please do consider subscribing and kicking me up into those quadruple digits finally. Thanks, everybody, and have a fantastic day.